All right, welcome back here to the My Sports Update Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ari Merov. Haven't done one of these in a while, but with the draft now behind us, we had to bring it back. A lot to talk about, a lot happened, and there's no better way to do it than to have a guest on as well. My good friend from ESPN, Jordan Schultz, is joining me. Jordan, welcome. What's happening, my friend?
What's up?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Yeah, listen, a lot happened over the last couple of weeks, especially with the draft. We had a lot of surprises. I want to talk about all of it, but I got to start with one story that, took over the draft, and that's Aaron Rodgers. When you saw this story about Aaron, and now we have more details about it, what did you think about it, and what do you think is going to happen over here? Because I feel like it's going to get serious in a few weeks, in a few months.
Yeah, I'm still navigating this thing myself with, reaching out to people around the league. But my sense is that it's very real, and this has been going on for quite some time. We all know the writing on the wall that he's been there since '05. They never drafted a receiver in the first round. They got hammered last year for not doing it, and that was by me, including me. Then this year they pass again and take a good corner in Eric Stokes, but nonetheless not a receiver. And it's been a problem, for a long time. And they took Jordan Love. I think their thought process was, this will blow over. But the issue is that Rodgers' issues with the organization go so far back to the Mike McCarthy years that this has been percolating for a long time. And Love is far from ready. And so, remember, he wasn't their number 2 last year. He didn't dress. He was a project when they took him, and he's still a very young quarterback with very few reps. So I think Rodgers has obviously all the leverage. And for the Packers to come out and say we're not going to trade him is them basically being like, we're not going to publicly deface themselves. But they're in a really tough position because their franchise is not happy, has publicly said it. And whether or not you agree with him, he did it differently than Russell Wilson, but whether or not you agree with him, that's the situation that we're in. And I think it's going to be, I think we're just getting started on it.
Yeah, I think it's just starting right now when it comes to it being in the public, right? This has been going on privately for a while now, but now everybody knows about it. Here's the thing for me. Do you think there's a way where this could actually be resolved, where he actually does come back to Green Bay? Because when I look at this, I believe Aaron is very strategic. He's very smart. What he wants to do is what he is going to do. And he already has a legacy in Green Bay. He's been there for 16 years. He won a Super Bowl. He's had a lot of memories there. I think he does not want to be the villain in all of this, and that's why he's trying to do this in a very specific or strategic way. But do you see a scenario where this could actually come back and Green Bay has him come back for another year or for multiple years?
Brian Gutekunst, the GM, has buried himself. And I think as a result, the answer is no. I don't think there is a reconciliation. And I was in the camp of, despite the differences, they'll figure it out. And then I changed to, okay, this is a problem. And now I'm at the point where I think it's the point of no return. I would be very surprised if Aaron Rodgers is a Packer in week 1. I really would. I don't know if Jordan Love would be the starter. Maybe they would go out and get a veteran, but I don't think it's going to be Rodgers. And for me to be in that position, for me to say that, I think it says a lot to myself, at least, because I never thought I'd be there. I thought they at least had one more year with him, And so I don't know if Rodgers, I don't know where he would end up. The asking price is going to be astronomical. There's probably 5 to 7 teams that can go out and get him. But he's made it abundantly clear that he doesn't want to be in Green Bay.
The wild thing for me is that all of this was avoidable, right? None of this had to happen. None of it, right? Coming off the NFC Championship game, 1 game away from the Super Bowl, move up for a quarterback. We've talked about that so much. The thing for me is that, let's just say Atlanta took a quarterback this year at number 4. Matt Ryan would totally understand the decision. When the Giants took a quarterback at number 6, Eli Manning knew that he was close to done, right? The Packers coming off the championship game, 1 game away from the Super Bowl, and then trading up for Aaron and not telling him was really where it just set him off. I mean, we already knew that he was pissed off with Mike McCarthy a little bit, but that they got a new coach, everything was fine. It felt like everything was good. Now all this happens and it's blowing up once again. And for me, as I said before, I believe if Aaron really wants to get out of there, it's going to happen. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't need anything else. He's gotten paid more than enough. He'll sit out if he has to. I really, really, truly believe that. The bigger thing for me right now is the Packers traded up for Jordan Love. I don't really know if he's ready to play. And that's the bigger question for me. Do the Packers think that he's ready to be a starting quarterback on a team that has the pieces ready to go and have a chance to go back to where they were last year in the NFC Championship game, right? The Packers still have a lot of good players. They still have a very good offensive line and weapons. Is Jordan Love the quarterback? I don't know if he's ready.
He's when they drafted him, he threw, he had a ton of interceptions his final year at Utah State. He had a new coordinator, so it was kind of passed over, but he's, probably at least another year away from starting. So I think they would go out and get a veteran. Maybe they would try to get Jimmy Garoppolo, but Rodgers is under contract through the 2023 season. So he has 2 more years under contract, but he doesn't have any more guaranteed money. So that's, I guess, the slight leverage that maybe the Packers have. But Rodgers at this point, you said his legacy is intact. He's a historian, and he knows that he needs to win at least one more Super Bowl to put himself into that elite category of multiple Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. So, if he were hypothetically to say, let me just stay and play one more year here, who's to say they wouldn't make a run and then win a Super Bowl and try to make it work. But I just think we're past that. And, it's almost irrelevant whether or not Jordan Love is ready.
Here's the one thing about this that I think is not getting talked about enough is that with all this going down, I believe Aaron does not want to become the villain in all of this, right? When this was going on with Brett Favre became the hated guy. He became the villain in Green Bay. For Aaron Rodgers to get out of there, he wants the focus to be on the Packers and the front office, and it's their fault why this is happening. It's not me, it's them. And for now, I believe the public perception is that the Packers are really the one who are wrong over here, and Rodgers has a reason to be right, and Rodgers should get out of there, and Rodgers should find a new team. For now, when I look online, when I hear Packers fans, that's what I see right now, and I think Rodgers wants it to stay like that until he gets traded and forever, right? He wants to be a Packer for life, and the team is the reason why I'm leaving. That's what he wants the headlines to be.
But Green Bay, the Packer fans, if you listen to local radio, and I'm sick, so I listen to local radio. I want to hear what they're saying. There's definitely some uproar.
It's not as much as Favre, that's for sure.
Not as much as Favre, but it's a tough situation for the Packers because their franchise has been defined by the last 2 quarterbacks they've had, and so to not have stability all of a sudden there when you believe you have a championship roster is demoralizing. And we'll see if the league pursues all these tampering things, and the Packers saying they're not happy other teams contacted him, and but really the bottom line is for the first time in a long time, since 2005, Rodgers, I believe won't. I don't think he'll be a Packer for Week 1.
Yeah, I know it's bad. I really don't know how bad it is. I really don't know if there's a way of resolving this. Maybe the one way is and again, I don't really think money really matters to him anymore. But if they were to renegotiate a contract, and the Packers don't do this traditionally the way they set up their contract, but if they were to redo his contract where he's essentially locked in, it's impossible to get out of his contract for the next 3 years, let's say, and he is the guaranteed starter over there, right? It's impossible to trade him, impossible to release him, impossible to move on. He's the guy, and there's no doubt about it. Maybe he comes back. The thing is, I really don't know if that's going to help. I really think it's that bad. And my next question about this, and the final thing we'll talk about when it comes to Rodgers, is if he does get traded, where do you want to see him going?
Man, that's tough. Okay, so in theory, Denver, and the teams in theory that make the most sense would probably be Denver, Washington, maybe Miami. The Raiders are probably in that mix. Basically, teams that need a quarterback that also have draft capital or believe they're, a good quarterback away, let alone a great one at Rodgers to winning a Super Bowl. So, let's take the Washington football team, for example. It's a perfect. The reason I would say them is they really don't have like I love Heineke. They signed Fitzpatrick, but they believe, and rightfully so, they have a championship defense. And they're starting to build a really good offense in terms of skill position. So if you were to bring in Aaron Rodgers all of a sudden, that team would be one of the Super Bowl favorites. I mean, they're on the verge of that. You know, they're probably going to be the heavy favorites to win the division as it is. So I think, you know, Washington, but the asking price, like I said, is going to be enormous. So are you willing to part with 3 or 4 years of draft capital with the hope of winning a Super Bowl in the next couple of years? Are you that confident in your roster?
You know, when you talk about confidence in a roster, I look at Denver. I mean, that's going to be the team that I'm watching throughout this. First of all, they're in the AFC. Different conference. I think that matters over here. But look at that team offensively and defensively. The offensive line there was much better last year, especially at left tackle with Garrett Bowles, who looked like a bust for the first 3 years of his career. Then all of a sudden became just an all-pro type of a player and got an extension. Weapons, you have Sutton coming back from the ACL, Judy, Hamler, Noah Fant, Melvin Gordon. They traded up for a running back. Defensively, of course, you have Vaughn and Chubb. The secondary is stacked. They used the 9th overall pick on another cornerback. They signed Darby. They brought back Kareem Jackson. They extended Justin Simmons. That team has pieces there to win. It's the quarterback that's the problem there, and Drew Lock is not the answer. Teddy Bridgewater is not the future answer there. They could be a team that would make sense, but I don't think this happens anytime soon. I think this is something that's going to stretch into training camp, and if Aaron Rodgers does not show up for training camp, then this is really serious, and I could see it happening then. But until then, it's going to take time. But, you know, this is the time of year where it's dead in the offseason. There's not much going on. This offseason will be different. There will be a lot to talk about with all of these quarterbacks that are making a lot of noise. All right, let's shift over to the draft now, because a draft did happen and a lot did go down, and we had some surprises. I want to start at number 2 because I'm from New York, you're from New York. What do you think of how Joe Douglas has been building this roster, his offseason so far? I've said for a while that I like what he has planned, and I think we're finally seeing his vision.
Well, they have, for the first time, some optimism, you know, and I've certainly been critical of Joe Douglas with his handling of different situations, especially the Jamal Adams situation. But, you know, they bring in a great young head coach, and they have, to me, one of the real steals of the draft. I said it on draft day when they drafted Michael Carter from North Carolina. They ended up getting both Michael Carters,
Yes.
who I love, the Duke defensive back. They drafted, to me, a potential superstar in Zach Wilson. Did they reach on Vera Tucker? Perhaps, but they need to fortify the offensive line. So now they have him and Becton for a quarterback. And then they went out and got Elijah Moore, who was probably the best route runner in the draft if you talk to most scouts. And, you know, one of these guys that is going to make an instant impact. So they did an unbelievable job in the draft. I gave them an A. And then, you know, they have an opportunity now from an offensive standpoint to actually be pretty damn good. And I'm excited about that if I'm a Jeff fan.
So I went back this morning to check this out. On October 13, 2020, when the Jets were winless, I tweeted the following, quote, "I'll say something right now that might not be so popular. Jets GM Joe Douglas has a vision. He inherited a huge mess from the previous regime. He's been cleaning that up over the last year. Jets have picks, they have cap, and there's a good chance he'll pick his own head coach. You need to have patience." I wrote that. I tweeted that. I think that vision is starting to take place. I think the general fan is starting to see what the Jets are doing. They have 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks once again next year. Robert Saleh's energy is infectious. Mike LaFleur is the new offensive coordinator. And for people who don't know much about him, when Matt LaFleur, Mike's brother, the Packers head coach, he wanted to hire his brother onto his staff. Kyle Shanahan blocked it because that's how important Mike LaFleur was to Kyle Shanahan. So he is now the new offensive coordinator in New York. Zach Wilson is someone that so many people talk about as a potential superstar if he develops the right way. I mean, the things that he does on the field is stuff that we do not see often on the football field, right? And he enters an offense, this is the best part about it, he enters an offense with better players than Sam Darnold ever had in New York. So I look at what Joe Douglas has done so far. I think it might take another year, but the Jets could be a team to be reckoned with very soon because he is building a team the correct way. He's not overspending in free agency the way the previous regime did. He is going to build this team slowly but surely, but eventually it's going to be a very good team.
Well, Zach Wilson has as much natural talent and ability as I mean, if you like, I'm not a quarterback evaluator, but when you start asking people around the league about this guy, the comparisons to Aaron Rodgers and Mahomes, I mean, it wasn't just like random. That's what you kept hearing. And the fact that he is, and I can tell you this definitively, he is a total gym rat, film rat, whatever you want to call it. I mean, go back to last season and BYU had this weird schedule and like everybody else, but like they didn't even play Coastal Carolina. They didn't know until 2 or 3 days before. And he gets them ready to play that game. They ultimately lose, but he played, I thought as well as you can play the position despite not great circumstances. And I think, I've heard detractors say, well, he didn't play great competition. I think, listen, the guy is going to be a superstar. I think he's tailor-made for New York, his style, kind of that swashbuckling style. And like you said, he already has more help before he steps into the building than Sam Darnold ever did. And I really do love the fact that they got Vera Tucker. He's going to be a really good, great guard. And then like I said, the Elijah Moore and Carter picks, those are really high level players from day one.
Yeah, I mean, the pieces are there. Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims, Keelan Cole, and then Jamison Crowder is still there for now. He has a $10 million salary for next season. But those are the receivers. Chris Herndon is the tight end. He has not blossomed yet, but a lot of people still believe there is a lot of room there for him to grow. The offensive line, you have Vera Tucker now at left guard. You have Mekhi Becton at left tackle. That is the left side for Zach Wilson for the next 10 years. That is set up now as well. Robert Saleh, is not a person in the world who does not like Robert Saleh. He's the head coach. If you're a Jets fan, there is optimism here that you're going to be good. And then again, you come back next year, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. This is a team that there's finally some buzz around here in New York for the Jets. So let's move over to number 3 overall, where the 49ers kept everyone in the dark for a full month and then drafted Trey Lance. What did you think of that pick?
Well, the Niners had kind of the ultimate smokescreen, if you will, because for a long time we believed it was going to be Mac Jones, and then the odds changed last minute to Trey Lance, and then you thought, well, could they potentially get Justin Fields? They really did an incredible job of keeping that close to the vest. And when it comes to Trey Lance, the hardest part for Trey Lance is going to be, he really hasn't played a lot of football. This season he had the one showcase game. He did not play well. And he has like the 300 something throws in his college career, which I think is the fewest number ever for a top 5 pick. Him and Mark Sanchez. I mean, he really hasn't played a lot of football. The upside for Trey Lance, though, is special. I mean, he has all the tools. And talk about having the tailor-made offense and a coordinator in Kyle Shanahan who's going to get this guy so prepared to succeed. And they have weapons. I love the pick. I wonder for you, in your sense, do you think they should have gone Fields? Because obviously both those guys play in and out of the pocket. And if you were going to go with that style of quarterback, do you think it should have been someone who was more experienced?
Here's my problem. I really don't understand this because ultimately what we know is that they came down to Trey Lance and Mac Jones. Justin Fields, for some reason, was number 5 on their board, and Justin Fields ended up sliding to number 11. And if Chicago didn't trade up, how far would he have slid? That's really what I don't understand. So what I want to know is really, why did San Francisco end up going with Lance or Mac Jones? And what do they see in Justin Fields that made them go, no, we don't want him? That's what I don't understand. I always thought that Justin Fields would fit that offense more. You see in the division, of course, you have Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson. I think you adding a Justin Fields would be that type of a quarterback for Kyle Shanahan, and what he could draw up with him would be just fascinating. My question has always been, what in the world happened that Justin Fields slid that far? And what happened that Kyle Shanahan said, nah, I'd rather have one of these two?
I really don't know. And I thought the Justin Fields analytics, that he was so over scrutinized. So there was more tape on him, so we scrutinized him. than more so than we did Lance, who didn't play a lot. And, whether it's fine to like one more than the other, but for Fields to have been that low on their board, it really is surprising. I think he's going to be a great player. But in terms of Lance, the 6'4", 230-pound frame, really strong runner, twitchy enough. I think it was Daniel Jeremiah who said he thought he was above average arm strength. He's accurate. He's very accurate. And teammates loved him. I think he's going to be a great player. I really do. And I'm excited to see what they do with him early. Do they keep Garoppolo? Do they sit Lance? I think maybe Lance sits a little bit, but you can see him with Kyle Shanahan in 3 years being like one of these dynamo playmaking quarterbacks, man. And he's still very young. He's not even 21 yet.
Yeah, but he's only 20 years old. And ultimately, I think they believe that Kyle can mold any of these quarterbacks. And really, when it comes to quarterbacks in the draft, it's really all situational, right? What are they walking into? Like Lance in San Francisco, he's walking with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Trent Williams at left tackle, one of the best offensive minds in the league with Shanahan, and a defense that is top 5 when fully healthy. When you're number 3 overall pick, you're not supposed to be getting all of that, right? Usually you're walking into a rebuild or a dysfunctional place, right? That's not the case over here. And that's why also, they're really adamant they're going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. I actually believe them because I really believe that they want to start off with Jimmy and then eventually hand it over to Trey Lance. And I think that's what is going to happen unless they get blown away with an offer for Jimmy Garoppolo, similar to what happened with Philadelphia a few years ago with Sam Bradford and Carson Wentz, if you recall, right? They were going with Sam Bradford, then all of a sudden the Teddy injury happens in Minnesota, and they're able to get a first-round pick, and they're like, hey, Carson Wentz, this is your job. Do your thing, right? And it's kind of funny. It's a similar situation with North Dakota State quarterbacks as well. So it's fascinating over there, but I think they're going to start off with Jimmy, and again, whichever quarterback landed over here, no quarterback is getting a better situation than San Francisco.
Well said. Yeah, well said. Which leads you to believe that someone like Lance, who doesn't have a lot of experience and hasn't played against elite competition, it's the perfect place for him to go. I think the comparisons we've kind of heard, the Steve McNair, Dak Prescott, he's kind of got all that, and for him to come in is considered one of the smartest players in this draft. I mean, everyone said the same thing about him. Incredibly intelligent. I think he'll pick up the offense. It is a very tough offense to learn, but he'll pick it up. And like you said, the weapons there as well. The Trent Williams thing can't be discounted. If I'm a Niners fan, as you have a really good roster, and now you have a future quarterback and I think a future star.
Yeah, Lance's intelligence is something that really blew away the 49ers, and that was one of the things that they really valued in all this, besides for his play and his fit in the offense. That's another thing that they really liked about him, and ultimately, he's the pick in number 3. He is the future at the position for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Now, the next 2 picks in this draft were really fascinating to me because we'll be looking back at it in 2 years, maybe even less than that, because at number 4, the Falcons went tight end over a future quarterback, and then at number 5, the Bengals went wide receiver over an offensive tackle. What did you think of those 2 picks? Was that the right decision to make?
So I'll start with, you said Atlanta with Pitts?
Pitts over a quarterback, yeah.
So I love that because Matt Ryan's 36, and I think this is one more hurrah with him. I love it from the perspective of if they ultimately, assuming they keep Julio, to have Pitts, Julio, and Calvin Ridley is really going to be fun to watch. Okay, so selfishly, I want to see that. And if Pitts really is this once in a generation, once in a lifetime type of talent, which it really does appear he is, then you can't pass that up. Forget the tight end thing. Said this, he's really just a weapon. He's not a normal tight end. He's kind of, you think about George Kittle, he has that ability. And then you think about the 5th pick. Now, the whole concept for Cincinnati for me was protect Joe Burrow, get Penei Sewell, and just make Joe Burrow's life so much easier. But then for Jamar Chase, his former teammate, to fall into their lap. And now you pair him up with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. Now all of a sudden, the Bengals to me are going to be one of the most explosive offenses in the league. And they still have a ton of holes, but defensively and the offensive line, we know struggled a lot last year, and Burrow missed most of the season. But I think it's really hard to say, don't take Jamar Chase, who by some people's measures was the best receiving prospect of the last decade, somewhere in that vicinity. So I don't have a problem with either pick. And by the way, I forgot to say this. We did a live draft show, myself and Austin Eckler, and we had Raheem Mostert on when the Niners drafted Lance, and he was fired up. I meant to add that. It's a little nugget in there. I'm excited to see him and Lance in that backfield. But anyways, going back to these picks, if I'm the casual NFL fan, I'd probably be more perplexed by Atlanta taking Pitts, just because Matt Ryan, we know, is on the very tail end of his career. So that would probably be the one that was more vexing, but I understand and really did like both of them.
So yeah, for me, there was a lot of talk about these two picks, right? And when it came to Atlanta, the one thing that I was being told a lot was that the Matt Ryan contract is really, really difficult to get out of, not just for this year, but for next year, right? So it didn't get as much pushback as I thought it would. The Bengals pick got way more pushback than anything, because we all know what happened to Joe Burrow last year. We all know it's become easier to find wide receivers in the NFL. Like even last year, Cincinnati, T. Higgins was a second-round pick. A.J. Brown was a second-round pick. DK Metcalf was in the second round. Terry McLaurin was a third-round pick. Finding receivers has become easier, quote-unquote, or not as easy, at least, as offensive tackle. And when you look at Cincinnati, the main priority there should be protecting Joe Burrow. But on the other hand, what I heard about Jamar Chase, and you mentioned it, there's a lot of people who believe this guy is going to be a superstar in the NFL, and not just your average receiver. He's going to be one of those top 3-4 receivers in the NFL, and the chemistry is already there with Joe Burrow from LSU, so why not pair them up again? So that's going to be fascinating to watch these next few years, and we'll know right away if this was the right pick or not. If Joe Burrow is getting sacked a lot next year, we'll be looking back at this pick and saying, you guys kind of messed up there. You had 2 offensive tackles available, and you went with a skill position.
And think about Detroit. They don't have to do anything, and Sewell falls into their lap.
That's the team I want to talk about right now, because you know how I mentioned how I see Joe Douglas's vision? The other team that I think has a vision I believe will finally turn it around in a couple of years is Detroit. Brad Holmes is a talent evaluator at heart, and he's going to build this team the right way, and it's going to take some time. But I believe in him, and he's building from the inside out. Trenches will be the focus first. And we saw in that draft, Penei Sewell just falling to them. Are you with me on Detroit? I believe it's going to take maybe a year or two. They have 2 first-round picks next year and the year after that. I think this is a team that's going in the right direction for once.
A really interesting point. They haven't been relevant, this franchise, my whole life. I'm 35. I don't remember the Lions consistently being relevant. I was almost too young for Barry Sanders, but even then. So you think about what they've done. They ultimately still believe that Jeff Okudah, top pick last year, is going to be a shutdown corner despite his brutal rookie year. So now you think about Jared Goff, who is still going to be for better or worse, he's their guy. And so what did they do? They got Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC. They have DeAndre Swift, who by all intents and purposes is going to be a big time running back. We saw they have a pretty damn good edge. They have a Penei Sewell, who this left tackle kind of dancing bear, who is really going to be a superstar, I think, from day one, and is probably going to be one of the premier tackles in the league for the next decade. And then don't forget, they drafted my guy Levi Onwuzurike. I want to pronounce that right. Levi Onwuzurike from Washington, who is an instant impact defensive tackle. So I just named off 7 or 8 guys that I think are going to be huge for them right away. And they have a new head coach who wants to break kneecaps. So I'm excited about the Lions.
When you look at their offseason, Jordan, you look at what they've done, Tyrell Williams, Jamal Williams, Michael Brockers, right? Nothing flashy, 1-year deals there. But these are guys who are going to be veteran leaders, quality players on a roster that is rebuilding. You look at their draft, offensive tackle round 1, defensive tackle round 2. Those are building blocks for the future. They're not players that the average fan is looking forward to. You're not buying their jersey, right? It's not Devontae Smith, but they're guys who are going to be there for the next 10, 12 years and are going to make that franchise relevant again, because those are really, you start from the trenches, right? That's what Brad Holmes is doing. And remember, Brad Holmes was with the Rams for 17 years. He's a talent evaluator at heart, like I said before. And he got a 6-year deal to come to Detroit. So did Dan Campbell, which basically means it's very rare to get that. Ownership is telling them, you have time to do this your way. Take your time. There's no pressure. Fix our organization up, and we're not going to disturb you. That is basically what the ownership is telling them. So they're going to take their time. They have 2 first-round picks next year. They have 2 first-round picks the year after that. And I don't know if Jared Goff is the guy. I really don't. I think they took that offer from the Rams because of the 2 first-round picks in future years, when the combine will be back, when they will be able to evaluate all these players, when they will have medicals on all these players, right? That is what Brad Holmes loves to do. And I think in a couple of years from now, they are finally going to have so many building blocks on this roster that eventually Detroit will become relevant again, and it's going to be a really good team. It's not going to happen this year. It might not happen next year, but it's going to happen eventually, and they have time to do this. There's no pressure. There's no worrying that you might get fired because you went 3-14 this year or whatever it is. Whatever the case is, they're putting together a roster with a lot of key players for the future, and they have picks now, and I really believe that eventually we're going to see a Detroit team that will be relevant. I really believe that.
Yeah, well said. I'm in agreement.
Okay, great. I got all that out, but let's take an NFC North here, because we talked about Justin Fields before. What did you think of Chicago moving up for Justin Fields and getting him to be the face of the franchise?
I loved it. I mean, we just said the Lions haven't been relevant. Well, the Bears haven't had a quarterback ever for me. I mean, they went to a Super Bowl with Rex Grossman, but they've never really had a quarterback. And we know that Trubisky's situation was a disaster. He's gone. Another team that believes their roster is really good. They have a good defense. Allen Robinson, who they tagged again, is who I've gotten to know pretty well, and I know has been really frustrated. He's terrific. And you give him someone, Justin Fields, who can move the pocket, has played in big games, has played through injuries in the college football playoff. And I've talked to Sean Wade and Trey Sermon, his former Ohio State teammates that are now in the NFL. And they both say the guy's an absolute dog. He really is. And I just think Justin Fields has whatever you want to say, it factor. I think Justin Fields has it. I think he's smart. I think he's been in the spotlight basically since his freshman year of high school. He was heavily recruited, and really every step of the way, even right after he leaves Georgia with all the pressure of Ohio State, every step of the way he's succeeded. So I think it was a great move. They gave up a fair amount to get him. You knew they had to. And now all of a sudden you think about the NFC North. If Rodgers were to stay, think about these quarterbacks. Rodgers, Cousins, Goff potentially, and then Justin Fields. All of a sudden, Chicago in theory could have the best quarterback for the next decade. I mean, that's how talented Justin Fields is.
It's been a really long time since we've seen Chicago football fans just united on one thing. Like, they all love Justin Fields, and I'll be honest with you, I was shocked that they were able to do it, because I thought ownership would not allow them to do this, considering that Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, I mean, we all know they're on the hot seat. They have a bad year this year. They're gone. And ownership let them not only get a quarterback, trade up for a quarterback, and give up a first-round pick in order to get him. That means if Chicago has a bad year this year, and let's just say Ryan Pace is fired, the new GM is going to come into a situation without a first-round pick and with a quarterback that was handpicked by the other GM. So I was shocked that happened, but if you look at the Bears, we both agree that I think Justin Fields is a phenomenal quarterback and should do well. They move up and get him. The Bears defense is still very good, obviously. Khalil Mack, Eddie Jackson. The wide receiver room, Darnell Mooney is another player they really like. Allen Robinson on the franchise tag. I know he's not happy about that, but he's going to be there this year. Cole Kmet at tight end. They have pieces there, and all of a sudden, Chicago Bears fans are excited once again, and that's what makes the draft so fun, right? Bears fans came into this draft being miserable about Andy Dalton being their quarterback, and now all of a sudden they're all hopeful that they have their franchise quarterback for the next 10 plus years. That is what makes the draft so fun.
Fields is going to be the future of this organization and potentially the best quarterback in this division for a long time. And there was a lot of pressure, as we know, on both Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace to win in this draft. And, Pace has always said he wants to be aggressive. We saw what happened with Trubisky, him moving up to get him. The fact that they have Justin Fields now in their locker room, they finally have an identity. And, Bill Lazor has been, I think, is a very good coordinator who's going to help Fields quickly develop. And don't forget about Darnell Mooney either, a good young receiver. So I'm excited about the Bears. I mean, that division is really exciting because, there's no reason why Minnesota can't win 10 games, by the way. So I'm fired up.
Definitely. And all of a sudden for me, Chicago, first of all, we know how crazy their fans are. I think Justin Fields is starting from day one just based off, the fans' reaction there if it's not him. But the Bears are right now for sure a team that I want to watch next year. Now if the draft in the books, let's wrap this up with this. Is there an up-and-coming team in the NFL that you are excited to watch next year? Like for me, I really want to watch Carolina. And I really want to watch the Chargers. I think those two teams quickly come to mind for me. Any teams for you that you really cannot wait to watch right now to see what they have going?
Great call on the Chargers. Yeah, dude, the Chargers are, I mentioned Austin Eckler earlier. You think about that offense and another year, a full, well, maybe not a full summer because of the COVID situation, but a real opportunity for Justin Herbert to learn the playbook more, get his work in, understand what the NFL is all about. And you bring back a healthy Derwin James, and you think about drafting Asante Samuel Jr., who's going to be a really good corner. They're really excited about Jalen Guyton, a young receiver. They've been active. And then I just think from an offensive standpoint, that team is going to be, I don't know if it'll be the Chiefs, but, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Eckler, Josh Kelly, the line, I think they have an opportunity to be a 100% a top 5 offense. And because of James coming back and the health of that defense, it's going to be a really exciting team. And then and they drafted Rashawn Slater, who some scouts had higher than Penei Sewell. I didn't, but to bring in Rashawn Slater, who can instantly start at left tackle or at guard, is going to make a huge impact with Justin Herbert. I'm really excited to see what the Chargers do. I think Brandon Staley is going to be really good for them. Trying to think of another team though that could pop. I've been pretty confident that the Giants are going to take a step forward. And Daniel Jones, year 3, fully healthy. Saquon, fully healthy. At least we hope so. They bring in Kenny Golladay. Drafted Kadarius Toney at 20. They moved back from Florida, who is a beast. I think Kadarius Toney has a lot of the he has a lot of that Jalen Waddle or even a Deebo Samuel type where you can move him all over the field. He's really good after the catch. He can be used in the running game. He'll make life a lot easier for Daniel Jones. So I'm very excited about the Giants because I haven't mentioned the defense, but defensively, we saw last year against some of the league's best teams, they did very well. So the Giants would be kind of a super sleeper for me here. If they can stay healthy, which means Jones and Barkley, there's no reason in my mind why they can't make a run at the NFC East and get into the playoffs.
Yeah, Daniel Jones, year 3, and really no excuses anymore, right? Saquon, as you said, is returning from the ACL. Kenny Golladay is signed. They have Shepard. They have Slayton. You add Toney. You have Ingram. You have Kyle Rudolph. The offensive line, of course, going into now a second year of Andrew Thomas, the left tackle position, and Joe Judge in year 2, a coach that a lot of people are really high on. And you mentioned the Chargers. There's really no team in the NFL that revamped their offensive line the way the Chargers did this offseason.
They knew. They said, okay, we have a superstar quarterback. What's the only thing left to do? Protect him. And they did it.
And that's now going back to Cincinnati. Well, a lot of people were really giving them some backlash. And that's really where it comes from. You have Herbert, give him a left tackle, sign the all-pro center from Green Bay, Corey Linsley, boom, that offensive tackle. The offensive line is all of a sudden a top 10 offensive line compared to being a bottom 10 offensive line. And Cincinnati really didn't address that over the course of the offseason, right? They signed Riley Reif. They passed on the offensive tackle in the first round. They get one in the second round. It's going to be interesting to see how those two teams work work because two top quarterbacks drafted last year. One team goes all in on protection. The other team is like, we'll wait and get it. And I want to see how that ends up going because we saw Justin Herbert last year. He got thrown in week 2, was spectacular, won Offensive Rookie of the Year, and now he has even more help to continue crushing it. I'm really
excited. And that's absolutely right. And I've talked to Eckler, Hunter Henry, Tyrell Williams, who's on the Lions now, but former Charger, and they all just sing the praises of Herbert in terms of his intelligence and that he's just off the charts. And he's got that same kind of Trevor Lawrence frame, 6'6", athletic, great arm. We've seen it at the highest level. So I'm really excited about him. And going back to the Giants, the one guy I should mention too is Azeez Ojulari from Georgia, who I think is just going to be an instant edge rushing impact and just a fantastic young player that will fit the DNA of not only Joe Judge, but obviously Dave Gettleman as well. And you mentioned Joe Judge. I mean, I've talked to Daniel Jones about him. He thinks he's terrific. If they can sync up and really come together in this year 3 for Jones, and Judge being a young head coach in this league, again, I really do think the Giants have an opportunity to be a big one of the more improved teams in the whole league.
Yeah, and one more thing on Daniel Jones before I let you go. If he does not have the season the Giants are expecting, the Giants next year now have 2 first-round picks, which means they could always move up for a quarterback in the draft. They could always trade for one of these disgruntled quarterbacks because there are clearly a few of them out there that might not get traded this year, but they could get traded next year. So there is a lot of pressure on him to do well this year. The Giants got him all the weapons in the world. They're all expected, obviously, to be healthy, especially Saquon being the key one there. So if he does not have a big year, keep that in mind with the Giants going into next offseason, that they could be looking for a new quarterback next year, and they do have 2 first-round picks. All right, Jordan, I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast here today. I appreciate it. People could follow you on Twitter. It is at Schultz_report. On Instagram, where you are absolutely crushing it, it is at Jordan Schultz. Let's do this again very soon, my man.
Sure, buddy. 100%. And as always, a pleasure.